Oh, Marius, you were brave, just not brave enough. Who's a better warrior? Who's a better warrior? You are. Oh, I know. Oh, hey, I didn't see you there. So we Celts get a bad rep in history, right? I mean, suck the souls out of the bottom of a few hundred of these guys, and history writes you off as madmen. Of course, it was the Romans that called us this, and let's be honest, they wanted something from us. Are we any more savage than the people that fed others to lions? Or the Mongols who took 90,000 skulls and stacked them up in a pyramid just to scare the people of New Delhi before they invaded them? Or the Spartans who would take their young that were deformed and chunk them off of cliffs? Or the Assyrians who built entire walls out of human skin to keep out invaders? Kind of like those Romans did when they built Hadrian's Wall to keep us out. Because the truth of the matter was, they were scared of us. But I digress. Today I want to talk about Samhain and how it turned into what we call Halloween today. So if you're interested in learning more about this time-honored tradition, then rock with me a minute as we take the journey within. What up, though? It's Justin. Welcome back to the Mystical Mind State. Celtic tradition is really hard to lock down in any specific terms. There's a lot of debate about whether or not you can even call this assortment of tribes an actual race, right? It's because they vary wildly from Eastern Europe to Western Europe. We traditionally think of Ireland and Scotland and Wales and England being the home of the Celts, but that's actually not true. They migrated there. And they get a bad rep in history because people wanted something from them. Like Julius Caesar literally went to war with the Gauls because they had gold mines that he wanted. Julius Caesar was in debt up to his eyeballs and was trying to make a political name for himself. So he went after their gold mines as a way to accumulate wealth for the glory of Rome. And he wrote them off as savages. Barely even human. A lot of what we think about when we think of Celts is actually attributed to him. We think of these wild-haired people that fought in the nude, and it's rubbish. It's not historically accurate. They bathed. They actually created soap, but since they didn't have a written language that actually put their entire history out, a lot of their accomplishments were given to other people. Like they'd actually created the Tin Road. That means they had commerce that went all the way from Eastern Europe into the British Isles, right? That was something that neither the Greeks nor the Romans had accomplished up to then. But they didn't get to write history, did they? The Romans did. So we remember this group of really violent, wild barbarians that had no actual culture to speak of. Like even when Julius Caesar accounts their religion, he breaks it down in Mercury and Jupiter and Mars, and that just wasn't accurate. But if you look at the islands, right, if you look at the British Isles, you'll notice a lot of those traditions have survived. Now, I know that they don't really have a lot to do with the mainland Celtoid that we think of, but the Pictish people and the other tribes that were in that area are the ones that resonate with me the most. See, my grandfather's name was Clord MacNally, right? So obviously, like, Pictish pride is in my blood. But they really encapsulated Celtic beliefs and kept them alive in those islands for centuries. So much so that a lot of the practices we have in Halloween actually come back to this ancient people. Like in the ancient times, around now, like these homes, like the ones you see behind me, would be putting out their hearth fires, right? They would be smoldering the ashes, and the druids, the priestly class, would be building a giant bonfire in the middle of their village, right? And this is a throwback to Zoroastrianism in a way, where there was always a sacred fire burning, and what they were doing is celebrating the death of the sun god coming into the earth, giving birth to the mother goddess, who would then see them through the winter, right? This was a way of honoring the law of cycles. And they also believed that at this time of year, the veils between the worlds were thin, so they used it as a time of somber reflection to communicate with their ancestors and really get grounded for the year to come. As they were going into the harsh winter months, it made sense to relight the fires that would burn and see them through this next part of the year, right, into this next year. This particular culture has been kept alive by a lot of different faiths. Like, if you go into a church right now or a temple, like, there will be a fire burning at the center of it, right? They never let those fires go out. In the ancient mystery schools of Greece, in the ancient mystery schools of Rome, where they had all of these different gods, they kept a virgin girl in the temple that would keep those fires alight. Now, this is a throwback to Zoroastrianism and some of the other Indo-European tribes. I think the Aryans that eventually headed east into India, right? But this was kind of a universal thing where they celebrated this ebb and flow, this law of cycles. And we see a lot of the remnants of that in Ireland today. Like, it's not uncommon for Irish families to light candles and then light other candles off of those and spread them around to the entire community, right? And a lot of people go into this form of somber reflection. The witch community sees this as the eighth spoke at the end of the year, just as the Celts did. And it's a time of reflection and seeking solitude and really grounding themselves and planning for the year to come. None of these traditions have really gone anywhere. In Ireland, they had Macandog, right? He was the infant son that was taken after 3 days of his birth and ran off to the races. His father was Dresda, and his mother was Bowen, right? The holy river that the sacred river that flows through everything. So when Christianity comes in, and they have God the Father, God the Mother, and God the Son in their pantheon, the same triune nature that the Celts were already used to, and they tell them they no longer have to make sacrifices throughout the year because that final sacrifice has been made, it really wasn't hard for the Irish to accept, so they Christianized relatively quickly. Now, of course, those of you that are familiar with Bowen know that the most recent version of her that we have is known as Brigid. And Brigid was so important to them that she was actually made a saint by the Catholic Church. See, the church was smart. When they would come into an area, they would take the local traditions and then give them a spin that related to their actual pantheon, right? That's why some historians believe that Halloween has its roots in Pomona, but if you look at the Roman calendar, that's not accurate. I think Pomona celebrated on like August 23rd or something like that, but it has nothing to do with honoring the dead. Now, All Souls Day became All Saints Day, and we see this alive and well today. Like, we're all going to celebrate this on November 1st. So it's not that these traditions went away, they just changed forms. And I think it's important for people to come to grips with that and to accept the fact that as Christianity grew into what it was, they picked up a lot of pagan influence along the way. We see this even more prevalent with the practice of Christmas, right? Like December 25th isn't even Jesus' birthday. That's actually Horus, right? But I digress. So as these people were setting these sacred fires, they also used it as a time of divination. They usually circled around marriage and things like that. Most marriages happened in Celtic communities around November. So they would take acorns, right, and they would put the names of the lovers on them, and they'd throw them into the fire. And if they crackled and popped really, really nice together, they'd have a happy marriage. Now, if they crackled and split away from each other, then there would be strife in the home, right? They would also use it to divine who they were going to get married to. They would have young girls yank kale from the ground and then hang it over the doorsteps, and then somebody else would come along and they would divine the roots. Like if it had more mud clumped into the roots, oh, you're going to have a rich husband, or whatever the case may be. And they made all of these games out of it where they celebrated with the children, and they talked to their ancestors because the veils were so thin, and they'd bring them up to speed on what would happen. Well, we see all that surviving today. Back then, they used to take turnips, right, and they would hollow them out, and they'd put embers in them to light the way for the dead. Well, that's exactly what the jack-o'-lantern actually is today. Like, it's just when the Irish immigrants came into America, they didn't have the same access to turnips that they had, so they started using pumpkins. And then they would walk down the street, and they would sing songs to the dead, and they would go door to door collecting alms for the souls of those who passed. They would give extra alms to the souls that were still wrestling deep, deep in purgatory. And everything that was practiced at Samhain just kind of evolved into what we call Halloween. what we call All Hallows Eve, what we call All Souls Day, what we call All Saints Day. Like, it's only changed forms because everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. So when you look at the tradition with modern eyes, keep in mind what your ancestors did and find ways to honor them. Like tonight, I'm going to leave. I'm going to cook a chocolate pecan pie and take it out to my grandparents' grave and leave them each a slice, right? I'm going to pray with them, and I'm going to honor my family heritage. I'm going to honor who I am. I know a lot of people in the witch community would not recommend going to a graveyard at this particular time because the veils are thin. You know, they're afraid of the fae and some of the other things that are wandering around out there, but a continuous fire shall burn upon the altar. It will not go out. I feel very strongly that that sacred hearth is burning within me, and that is the light of Christ, right? Nothing changes. It only changes forms. So honor the dead, love your neighbors, be kind to each other, light the sacred fires, and celebrate the end of another cycle. You made it. That's all I got, guys. Thank you so much for watching.